Well, hello everybody, I am Slow Rider. This is my world, sort of. How are we all doing? Welcome, welcome, welcome. Good to see you all come back. Now, I mentioned in a previous video there were two big subjects that tend to come out of the whole electric versus petrol motorcycle debate. One of them was noise, and it related to a much larger discussion, really, about whether loud bikes are good or not. This video, I'm going to deal with the second part of that, the second topic, and it's frankly a reason why I'm not going to buy an electric bike. Now, I know what some people are going to suggest, and that's that I should get on an electric bike and I should ride them, and then I'll be convinced that they're a good bike and, you know, they're well worth buying. And to be honest, I have never ridden an electric bike, ever. I'm not saying I won't, I'm not saying they're bad, I'm not saying they're good. They could be wonderful, and I'm not against riding one to see what they're like. But I'm still not going to buy one. At least not yet. And it's this second reason. It's one of the biggest reasons that people give for not wanting an electric bike. Cost. They are just too expensive. One of the selling points they give you for electric bikes is that after you've bought them, they're cheaper to maintain and they're cheaper to run. Well, I can't argue with that. From what I've seen, I cannot argue with that at all. Maintenance costs are lower. The cost of electricity is cheaper than the cost of petrol. I cannot disagree. I really can't. I'm still not going to get one based on cost. Allow me to go through it. The first part of the sentence they give you about reason to buy is after the initial cost of buying it. Yeah. Do you know why they say that? Because they're expensive. They're ruddy expensive. If I was going to get one, it would be in place of this NC750S that I'm riding now. Which means I need a bike that does what this NC750S actually does. To put it in perspective, I don't just commute on this bike. I've taken it to Austria and to the south of Spain. I go camping on it. There's a lot of things I do. And honestly, electric bikes at the moment, you just can't go touring on them. Not over long distances, not to the furthest stretches of Europe land. It's just not a thing right now. The range isn't there. You do 100 miles on the highway and then you've got to recharge, which takes an hour and a half, 2 hours, 3-4 hours depending on your bike. It's not sustainable. You can barely get out of the country doing that sort of mileage. So there isn't really a bike to compare this to in terms of, is it worth it, isn't it worth it? So for the cost analysis, I've gone for a sort of medium range, middle of the range, I mean, well-known brand. Yeah, a Zero SR. Not the most expensive bike they've got, but also not the cheapest. Middle of the road. It's an example bike for the purposes of my cost analysis. So this NC750S, when it was brand new, cost me about £6,500. And if I'm going to replace it, it's for a brand new Zero SR, because there are some second-hand ones around, but not that many. And I do kind of worry that if someone's selling them, are they actually that good? But anyway, it could be a display model or what have you. The point is, not many second-hand ones around, so we're looking at brand new. Brand new 0SR with the power tank, 19 grand. Without the power tank, 15 and a half. So, in literal just buying stuff terms, I could get 2 to 3 of these for the cost of one SR. It's not a good starting point. When one of your selling points is it's cheaper, it's not a good starting point. But once you've bought it, yes, you start making some savings. And let's look at that for a minute. Maintenance. Now, I heard from one person on the internet that you can do a yearly maintenance thing, which is £150 a year, something like that. And that's fine. You don't have to do it. You can do your maintenance yourself, I imagine, if you really wanted to. I mean, it's just going to be checking the brakes and such like, so can't imagine it's too involved. But let's say, for the sake of argument, that there's no maintenance cost. Well, let's compare that to the maintenance cost of this bike. The maintenance cost very much depends on how many miles you do for this bike. 8,000 for your basic service, 16,000 for your slightly more involved service. Okay, fine. I've averaged over the last 3 years about 12,000 miles a year. It has been more in some years and less this year because of the pandemic, but let's go with that mileage, 12,000 a year. That means every 2 years I'm doing 3 services. Small, large, small, large, small, large. Over 4 years, therefore, I'm spending £1,800. Assuming I get a dealership to actually do it. The small service is about 200 quid, the large service is about 400 quid. 3 pairs of services, £1,800. That means, on average, that's how much per year? 450 a year? 400 a year? 450? Yeah, £450 a year. Very approximately. Very approximately. Well, okay. That's the cost we don't have with the electric bike because I've decided I'm going to maintain it myself. Or it doesn't need any maintenance. I'm not suggesting that's a serious thing. I'm just suggesting, for this price comparison, that's what we're doing. Because the idea is, it's very low cost. So that's £450 a year I'm spending over and above the cost of the petrol bike. Obviously a petrol bike needs petrol. A tank of petrol does me for about 200 miles on this. And to do 200 miles on an electric bike, I'm going to need 2 full charges. Generally speaking. A full charge on the electric bike is about 2 quid, give or take, so that's £4 for 2 charges. It may be less if you're charging at home. A full tank of petrol for this is about 18 quid, because it's a 14 litre tank. About 18 quid, give or take. That means the difference is 14 quid, like for like. But if I take for the moment the basic cost of filling up this for a tank of fuel for 200 miles, highway speeds, which is reasonably accurate, I would say, based on my riding around on it. For 12,000 miles, that's 60 tanks of fuel. 60 tanks of fuel at 18 quid. By my very rough maths, that's about £1,080 per year. Call it 1,050, because then we can round off with the £450 that we're spending on maintenance. That's £1,500. So this bike every year is costing me £1,500. not including tyres, brakes, which are the same for every bike, be it petrol or electric. So that's £1,500 per year I'm spending on this that I wouldn't be spending on an electric bike. Okay, great. There's a problem with this though, because we've already said that the difference in the cost of the bike for an SR with the power tank, so more mileage potentially, the difference is about 12 grand. And okay, it's about 9 grand if you don't have the power tank. Well, that means it's going to take 6 years to recoup the difference for the non-power tank SR, and 8 years to recoup the cost for the power tank bike. How many of the people out there are saying that when they get an electric bike, one of these early electric bikes, because technology will develop, obviously, how many of you out there is going to say you're going to keep that bike for 8 years? I'm imagining it's a pretty small number. Even 6 years, I would say, is going to be a pretty small number, and that's the breaking point for the cost of the bike. The break-even point. So this is not a good thing to realise. The whole idea that the bike is cheaper to run is massively offset by the bike being expensive to buy. Now, I'm due to renew the insurance on this bike fairly shortly, so I actually did an insurance check for quotes on the cost of insurance for this bike and also for a Zero SR. Now, I couldn't find an exact one for the power tank version. I don't know if that's different or not. It seems to be for older models. I don't know why it's not for the latest model. But the insurance renewal, third-party fire and theft for this bike, with its security features, my riding experience, where I live, where I park it, all that sort of stuff, on a comparison website, came up at very approximately £370. Now bear in mind, it will be different for every one of you out there. And I valued the bike at very roughly what it actually cost to buy, which means it's probably over-insured at this point, but it doesn't really matter. So, £370 for this little wonder. If I got a brand new SR and I wanted to insure it, third party fire and theft, do you know how many offers I got for that? None. Same comparison website, same person, using the same rule of insuring it for about the value that I paid for it, using security devices I know I would have. And I'm not entirely sure what security devices Zero actually offer with their bikes, so it's a little difficult to get an exact reading on that. But I've made a presumption based on what I think there is, and it's not a lot. But yeah, third-party fire and theft, no one will insure me. Literally no one. Not even one of those stupidly high, why the hell are you trying to insure this quotes. Nothing. Uninsurable. So I went for fully comprehensive. I figured it's got to be something to do with being third party. Fully comprehensive on this NC750, the latest quotes come out at about £660. Bearing in mind I commute, so, you know, I'm getting the cost for that. You know, I have to account for that in the insurance. So what do we think? Fully comprehensive for me, 19 grand bike. fully comprehensive. £4,132 for 1 year. I could insure this bike 6 times fully comprehensive before I even get close to the insurance cost on that electric bike. Now, granted, I've picked quite a valuable brand, middle of the road, sort of in their range. I could get something a lot cheaper just for commuting. I really could. Okay, I'm not saying that I can't. I wouldn't get a bike just for commuting, but I could do it. So, not only is it actually going to take me 6 years to recoup the cost of that bike, and as I say, I could get a cheaper one. I really could. I wouldn't necessarily want to, but I could. It's not going to cover what I want from the bike. It's not going to do what I want it to do. But even if it did, 6 years to recoup the cost based on maintenance and fuel, and the insurance is going to cost me 5 times as much per year. Why would I do it? Why would I bother getting an electric bike? Someone please explain it to me. Someone who owns an electric bike, please explain this to me. It makes no sense why anyone would buy an electric bike. I mean, okay, your individual insurance quotes, your individual mileages, maintenance costs, they're all going to be different to mine. So if you're trying to decide to get an electric bike or not, you have to do that comparison for yourself. No one can tell you what your insurance cost is going to be except an insurance company. So you need to look it up and make that decision. But for me, why will I not get an electric bike? They are too ruddy expensive. Period. In the future, I'm sure they'll get cheaper, relatively speaking. But for now, I'm sorry, no. Anyway, I hope that's been somewhat enlightening for you. Probably dead boring, but you know, there we go. That's the way these videos are going at the moment. Hopefully, you've not died of boredom and you'll be around for the next video. In which case, I'll see you there. Ta-ta for now.